And it's perfect alignment for me. Throttle up, make my turn. Welcome to the second video in the series. This is all about the first flight. Now, in the previous video, we talked about some of those things that will benefit you to make it so you don't destroy this thing and you have a successful flight. That's the goal. Successful flight, fun, still need to buy some props and glue because it's going to happen. But this first flight, whether you're on a buddy box or you're doing it all on your own, there's a couple things you need to know. We're going to go through that step by step on that first flight. We're going to go up, do our pattern. What does that mean? Going to kind of go through like this guy right here has a gyro on it with stabilization. It's very helpful on that first flight. Prevents this thing from piling in. Okay, and then we'll go through the approaches and landings. And it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of like my first flight on a lot of planes. A lot of my maidens, if you watch my maiden videos, I go through a pretty specific set of things I do. And that's what we're going to do here. So stick around. Stability mode test. How do you know when looking at your plane what gyro setting you have? Easy way to do it is when you get it all spun up, the reflex system, at least when it's all spun up and you're holding your plane, and if you move the wing, you'll notice the aileron is up and it's staying up. You'll notice if I pitch the tail back and forth, you'll kind of see the rudder moving quite a bit. Elevator, the same thing. If I point down, the elevator is making the plane go up. If it stays like that, it's in stabilization mode, which means it's going to self-level. Okay. If I go down into basically the assist mode or optimize mode, it just does it for a little bit. I make a little twitch, and you'll see the move. It's moving, but it doesn't stay in position, and that's just to help you buffer in the wind. So we're going to fly it in stabilized mode, though. Here's our first flight. We've got our plane set up. We're going to check the control surfaces, left, right. So when I go left, the left aileron will go up. By standing behind the plane is the best way to do this. Left aileron goes up when I go left, right aileron goes right when I move the stick to the right. When I pull back, the elevator goes up. When I push forward, the elevator goes down, and rudder, left, right, same thing. Okay, now I know the control surfaces are ready to go. You might be saying to yourself, duh, everybody knows that the control surfaces are going to be fine. I can't tell you how many times people have gone off on their flight and either a servo's broke or they are reversed. I mean, a lot of times. Every time you go up, check to make sure the control surfaces are working properly. Please do that. Your first flight of your RC plane. We've done a control check to make sure everything's moving properly. We've made sure that it's tracking properly. We got a fresh battery in. We're going to take off the first flight. So what's our plan? Plan is, first step, get her up in the air. And that's going to be a scary part. As soon as she lifts off, you're committed to flying this plane around. We're going to, in this case, there's no wind, so you can take off in either direction. We usually want to take off into the wind. So we're going to take off, and I'm going to make a left turn. I'm in stabilized mode, and also check to make sure you're in the right stabilization mode. So we're going to take off and make a left turn. I'm going to get off the runway as I'm walking back, flying the plane and doing circuits, left-hand circuits. That's it. That's all we want to do. And again, I'm only moving the sticks this much, really. It's minimal. On throttle, very little throttle up and down. You don't need to goose it all the way forward and all the way back. You will need to fly it over half throttle or so. All right, we're going to taxi. Hang on a second. There is a big part that we didn't really talk about, and that is trimming the plane. When it gets up in the air, it might not fly straight. The reflex stabilization mode will help if the plane is not in trim, but it's not going to do everything for you. So I am going to go into a little detail after this flight, so stay tuned. Going straight, we're going to start pulling back on the elevator once it's got speed, and she's up. Keep it at half throttle. And we're going to start making our turns. Oh,
remember to breathe, because you're going to be in panic mode right now.
One of the biggest things I see beginners do is they get full throttle and then they stay in full throttle. First thing, as you're making that turn, get off of full throttle. Get to about half throttle, maybe 2/3 throttle, depending on the plane. If you've chosen the right plane, you can fly very slow, like I am. Flying slow is how you're going to prevent your plane from being destroyed. That's a good height right there. Don't fly too high. Keep it close. So as I'm making these turns and in stabilization mode, I can just turn the stick and keep it in the direction I want to go. You might need to add elevator when you make the turn. Typically when you make a turn, you're going to lose some elevation, some altitude. That's okay. So like on that one, I didn't add any elevator on my turn. Here I'll add a little elevator on the turn, and it's staying about the same altitude. So it's kind of in that going a little left and pulling a little back, a little up. That's it. All we're going to do is make these circuits. It's that simple. And as I said, I am only moving the stick about, you know, 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch, hardly at all. All right, so now that I've done my circuits, I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like I can do it. Now, let's do some figure eights. And now you, instead of just making only left or only right turns, you're gonna be doing both left and right. Now in stabilization mode, so all I'm doing is pulling the stick and holding it in that slightly left or right position, giving a little elevator as I'm making my turn.
Again, this is in stabilization mode or safe mode. It's very different when you get into optimize or AS3X only.
And I haven't messed with the throttle a whole lot. Often I am moving the throttle maybe an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, up and down, depending on what I'm trying to do.
Keep in mind, that's like an 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch movement from center or middle throttle.
All right, now you still got a little bit, half battery left. What we're gonna do is start making approaches for landing. For your first landing, get your plane up. You're gonna line it up with the runway. So as you're making your wide turn, you wanna line it right up over the runway. Point it at yourself, come straight at yourself and start pulling back on throttle.
What I mean by pointing at you, when you make that turn, it's called base to final, your final approach. If you're pointing the plane at you and it's coming right towards you, it tends to end up over the runway a little bit better than any other way.
Fly right down the middle of the runway the best you can. At this altitude, it's perfect. Throttle back up and get up a little higher. We're going to do it again. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to back off throttle just a little. Going to make my turn. Going to start slowing down. I'm still up pretty high, so I'm not going to land, but I do want to make an approach. So I'm flying right over the runway. We're going to keep going lower each time. Make my circuit, concentrating on keeping her right speed. I'm going to back off on throttle a little bit to be a little lower.
Again, please note, I am making very fine adjustments to the throttle. I'm watching the plane and responding to what it needs. A little bit more throttle, a little bit less. Make
my turn again, and I'm going to drop down even a little bit more now. As I'm turning, I'm losing altitude. I'm going to hold it right there and fly right over the runway. Backing off on throttle. Right down the runway. I'm going to throttle back up, make my turn.
It's really important that you give more throttle. You've been backing off on that throttle on that approach. Speed the plane up, get the plane up to speed before you start making some turns, else you'll stall.
Don't pay attention to the timer. You got to pay attention to, but don't get panicked about it. We're just going lower and lower each pass to get comfortable with that approach. I'm going to back off the throttle even more. Coming down now. about a little over half, less than half throttle. Perfect. This is what you want to do. So you can spend half of your battery doing circuits, the other half perfecting your landing. On this one, we're going to come down and touch.
Real quick, the next video after this one is all about landings. So if you want to check that video out, I think it'll help you out.
And I want you to keep some throttle. I don't want you to cut the throttle completely. You're going to back off quite a bit because you need to descend. So I'm going to come down. I got about a third throttle, and it wants to come down. I'm going to give some elevator, working my throttle, and there you go. Easy as pie. All right, now when you get done with your thumbs shaking, congratulate yourself on a successful first flight.
It really helps to have the right airplane. As I talked about in the previous video, this FMS Ranger, good beginner plane.
Now you're going to change out the battery and do it all over again, and continue to do that until you're very comfortable. Well, you're never going to be totally comfortable, but until you feel a little bit more comfortable about it.
Real quick, I did want to talk a little bit about trimming. These little tabs right here, they move back and forth, and they usually make sounds. The direction you move them is the direction you're adding trim to the plane. Well, what does that really mean? Here's the elevator on the plane, and as I'm going up and down, you can see the elevator going up and down. If I'm flying and I notice the plane wants to climb, and so I have to actually push forward on the stick, and usually I'm pushing forward on the stick a very minute amount, let's say. Well, I could either fly the entire time like that, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because I want this plane to fly nice, straight, and level when I have my hands off. But what I can do is this little tab right here, if I push forward on that, that's actually pushing this elevator, just keeping it in that more of a down elevator trim. That's how the trims work. Same thing with left and right roll or rudder. Usually never have to touch with the trim over here because that's for your throttle. Anyway, this is how the trims are set up. I will say again, I would recommend you have somebody who knows how to fly these RC planes trim your plane for you first. If you don't have anybody, at least make sure the control surfaces are perfect. They should be perfect. You might have to mess with the elevator a little bit. On these trainer type planes like this FMS Ranger, I had to give a little elevator trim. That was it. Very minute.
About half throttle. And I can see she wants to climb a little bit, so I'm going to give it a little down trim. You're trimming in the direction you want the controls to go when your hands are off. Right now my hands are off, and it's climbing a little bit.
And then in stabilization mode, she flies very straight and level. So, just a little note on trimming.